Hi, I am Mike Schlosser, and I'm the director of the University of Illinois Police Training Institute. And I'm also a co-author of a book called Police Officer Wellness, Ethics, and Resilience, a step-by-step guide to improving police officer wellness, ethics, and resilience. And I want to welcome everybody to my presentation. I'm glad you're attending virtually. And so what we're talking about today is training innovations for creating the officer resilience and wellness mindset. And we're going to get into a variety of things, but this really is, there's so much more to it that we're just going to be kind of touching on some things. So. All right. Okay. So, for the overview, we need to know what we need to overcome, right? There's some issues in policing today and wellness, and it's a very critical issue. And so we need to know that we have to understand the components of wellness. And I think what you might find interesting today is there's kind of a missing component, and I'll get to that in a little more depth after a while, but there is a link between ethics and wellness, and I want to make sure I get to that. And then, of course, very importantly, I want to make sure that we cover coping and preventative measures for officers, various stressors that they may have, and to try to prevent some of these negative outcomes in policing. Okay, so believe it or not, there's still a stigma about mental health issues in policing. And I know that we've come a long ways. We really have. But when I think about it, it's like, okay, officers, we're still, okay, we're tough men and women, and we don't want to seek help because we're supposed to be able to overcome this. And so there's been, especially recently, there's been a lot of anxiety and depression since, the COVID era and the post George Floyd death, and what's happening. Officers are retiring early, leaving the field, and finding qualified candidates has been difficult. But when we teach wellness within our police academy, and I know a lot of departments are getting better at this, but I think what I think about when during this, and I've been at the Police Training Institute as a director for a long time. What I think about is during this COVID era, during the social unrest, I had dozens, probably 50 to 100 former recruit officers get a hold of me, call me. They just needed to talk to somebody. They were suffering from anxiety, they were suffering from depression, and they knew they could talk to me and trust me to talk to me. And we want to get to the point where officers are comfortable going to their agencies or going to someone professional or seeking out help. But it tells me that when they're not going right to their department or someone else, it's like, I don't know what to do, but I know I can trust Mike, and I'm going to call him and talk to him. And so a lot of them I was able to convince, you need to go get some help, and this is okay. I remember one particular incident where an officer called me, and he was having some problems with anxiety and just felt like people aren't trusting the police. And he said, my son is in college now, and he went off to college, and now he's anti-police. So you can imagine how that would impact that particular officer. So those are just, when I get that many calls, when I get that many conversations with people, it's like, okay, we still have a long ways to go with making sure that people are comfortable seeking help. All right, so first and foremost, we are a trauma-informed academy. So what does that mean? So I go in there on the first day, I talk about the training and how we're going to train and all the expectations, but we know we learn trauma-informed policing and things like that. But if you think about it, if I have 115 recruit officers sitting in a room and they're there on their first day, there's some anxiety there, obviously. But we also understand that out of all of those recruits, there's definitely quite a few, right, that have experienced some type of trauma in their life. And we just have to assume that whoever we're interacting with has had some type of trauma, and we need to try to learn what those triggers are. So in our trauma-informed academy, we know that if somebody is taking a class on sexual assault, if somebody's taking a class on domestic violence or elder abuse or a number of other things, that this may trigger something from their past. So it's okay for them to get up and leave the room, and they can reach out to me or one of my other instructors, and they need to feel comfortable doing that. And it's the same thing in training and in other places, right, for agencies and trauma-informed training. And today there's programs in place. If there's a critical incident, there's usually automatically, most departments like this, we need to debrief, we need to have this person talk to someone. And there's also groups out there that you can call and anonymously if you're having some issues. And so it's important that all of these things are, going on right now, and we need to be there for our fellow officers. And let me tell you how much times have changed. These are all great things happening, but again, if I'm getting those calls, we're still not there yet. So in the early 80s, when I started policing, it was a lot different. I had a call, and when I arrived, well, actually, I had transported somebody home that I had arrested for leaving the scene of an accident. It was probably a DUI, but when we found him, the vehicle was at a bar, so he had been drinking again, so we couldn't do that. So it was just leaving the scene of an accident. So I drove him home and walked him up to his house, and then he was living with his mother. And I walked in, and he walked about 3 or 4 feet from me, opened a drawer, turned around, looked at me with a gun pointed at his head, and shot himself. And of course, blood and everything going everywhere, just within feet of me. And I'm also interacting with the mother, who's hysterical. So obviously a traumatic experience. So what did we do back in those days, back in the early 80s? Well, I was told to stay there and help clean up the mess. And then when I was done, I was told to go write my report. And then when my report was written, I was going to go back out on patrol. And that's how we did it. You're a tough cop. This is the stuff that happens. You're going to have to deal with it. Get back out there and do your job. And then were also people saying, hey, I know this was kind of hard on you. Maybe we need to go out and drink some beers tonight. That will solve the problem. And not being a big drinker or anything, I didn't really want to participate in that. But so we've come a long ways, but we still have a ways to go. We really do. All right, so here's the not so good news. And again, improvements are great, but police officers suffer more often from heart disease, hypertension, and diabetes than the general public. Police officers have an above average risk of heart attacks, obesity, arthritis, ulcers, and cancer. Nearly 30% of officers overindulge in alcohol compared with 10% of the general population. And we know that officers usually go to alcohol as their source to try to cope with things, which is a negative source, of course, but they do that because that's legal. So that is an issue. I mean, I had an officer that I worked with, and he would drive his patrol car home. He'd pull in the garage. He'd grab 2 beers. He'd drink one on the way to go to the bedroom to change his clothes. He'd change his clothes. He'd drink another one on the way back to the refrigerator. And then he would drink himself to sleep every night. And not much older than me, but he's one of the many officers that I've known and that I worked with that have since passed. And a lot of these things I'd like to see not happen in the future. Great cop, good man, had that problem. And I wish he was still here today. And then we also know that depression and suicide, especially today, is probably increased in policing, more than even in the past. And we'll talk about that a little bit too, a little bit later. And as far as suicide goes, there were 632 law enforcement deaths across the nation in 2021. Nearly 25% of those were self-inflicted. And we also have to think, okay, those were the ones that were reported as suicide. Were there probably a lot others that didn't get reported as suicide that actually were? So this is still a big concern. And of course, just most of you are probably aware of these things, but I do want to bring them in. So there's direct verbal clues to, suicide. I'm going to kill myself. I wish I were dead. I'm going to commit suicide. I'm going to end it all. Obvious things. And then the indirect, I'm tired of life. I just can't go on. Who cares if I'm dead anyway? I just want out. Pretty soon you're not going to have to worry about me anyway. So these are indicators that are indirect, but they're still verbal clues that are easier to pick up on. So there's other clues too, other clues of that somebody has the potential that we need to help them so they don't get to the point where they actually commit suicide. So any previous suicide attempt, obviously, stockpiling pills, putting their personal affairs in order, giving away some prized possessions. Hey, Mike, gun's meant a lot to me for a long time. I've had it in my gun safe, but I'm not really using it anymore. And this is something I'd like you to have. And I knew how much that would mean to that person. So, that's a clue right there. Or a sudden interest or disinterest in religion. And then maybe drug and alcohol abuse or a relapse after a period of recovery. Unexplained anger, aggression, or irritability. So here's something else that I think we need to look for that usually is not listed as a suicide indicator. So we get to know our fellow officers so well, right? We work with them every day. They're our family. They're our brothers and sisters. And, whether it's just from working with them or doing things off duty with them, or doing what my chief used to call the magnetic squad cars, because he'd rather have you out patrolling, but you're sitting there and you're having these conversations with people and you're talking about things and maybe sometimes complaining about the department, sometimes talking about whatever, but we really get to know each other, personalities and behaviors. And so think about it like this: regardless of any of those things, even if it's not one of those things we just talked about, if they're just something's different, they're acting different, that could be anything. So if you got your fellow cop and something's different about him or her, no matter what it is, have a conversation. Is everything going okay? I've noticed you've been acting a little different less, I just want to, make sure you're all right. I'm here for you if you need anything. And, I know you handled that one call the other day. That was tough. I know that, you're going through a divorce and everything, and that could be part, but if you think that somebody may have that potential to take their lives, you don't beat around the bush, right? Joe, John, I need to know, are you or have you thought about committing suicide? Don't beat around the bush. Believe it or not, you will probably start a pretty good conversation. And I remember getting a call on Gerald Road and shot fired, and I knew the address because it was a cop that I'd been working with for 7 years on second shift. And I thought, okay, accidental discharge. I don't know what's going on. But another officer, Officer Grabo, and I, we get there, door's locked, we kick in the door. He's sitting in a chair in front of the TV, and he had taken his service weapon and he'd shot himself in the chest, and he was laying there dead. My brother, my friend. And so now I know more now than I knew then. We all learn as we go along. And then I start to think to myself, and this is something that we'll talk about later, as far as, should I have done something different, or could I have done something different? But I didn't know what I know now. And then so I started thinking about his behaviors. I thought back, was there something different? Was there something I could have or should have picked up on? And it was a tough situation, but he had this huge notebook that he had handwritten letters, notes about how much he loved his children and his wife, and they were in great length. And I'm sorry I had to do this, but I want to know this is what I think about you, and this is how I feel about you, and please forgive me for doing this. And so it was helpful to the family in some ways, but you can obviously it was really, really tough on them. So luckily, I can help a little bit because I knew the family, and I could tell them stories about how awesome of a cop he was, how awesome of a person he was and friend, but it's still not going to bring him back. So I always like to bring out that something different, and I don't know what it was. I can't think of it. All right, so don't become the walking wounded, right? So this is kind of what we're talking about here. Learn how to express your pain, your grief, your anger appropriately. These are all normal emotions, and it's okay to express them and not keep them in. And if you feel like you're having some trouble, talk to someone, right? I may talk to a fellow cop about a problem I think that the cop can help me with. I may talk to a friend that I think can help. I may talk to a family member because I feel more comfortable talking to them about this particular situation, or maybe somebody in the church. So whoever you're comfortable talking to, find someone to talk to. It helps so much just to talk about it. And don't be afraid to seek professional help. I know the stigma's still out there. And I have people tell me all the time, yeah, but if I do that, and then they find out this, then they're going to maybe put me on administrative leave. I don't want to lose my job, blah, 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 blah. But there are those so many wellness organizations that you can seek out anonymously. And of course, keep an eye on your fellow law enforcement professionals. Get to know them, and we need to be there for them, right? We're the law enforcement family. All right, so components of wellness, kind of obvious. Not going to get into great detail about this, but we know that physical health is important, right? We have a physical job, but physical health also helps you mentally and helps your confidence, and you'll feel better and about yourself. You know, we've got the cognitive wellness, you know, on our thoughts and what's going on in our minds. We've got emotional wellness, social wellness, and spiritual wellness. So these are the components of wellness, and we need to make sure that when we're instructing any kind of wellness course, it's nice to have like, okay, I may have to have this class today on just physical health because I may have to train people on how to properly lift weights, you know, how to warm up, how to stretch when you're just, you know, these kinds of things. But throughout time, or if you have enough time, all of these are necessary. We don't want to leave any of them out. And the four main components of physical wellness, you know, physical wellness is exercise, nutrition, sleep, and avoiding self-medication. And, you know, the thing that I think about when it comes to sleep is I grew up in a family, kind of a early on farmer family, right? I mean, that was kind of the history of them. And it was to show that sort of how, you know, your worth depended on how early you rose in the morning to get up and do those things, right? And I don't need sleep. I only need 3-4 hours of sleep, you know, and a lot of times cops and shift work, they say, nope, I don't need much sleep, but I can get back out there and do that. But we're learning so much more about the importance of sleep and good sleep and how that is such an important aspect of wellness. And of course, avoiding self-medication, whether it's alcohol or prescription drugs or whatever. So these are the physical components. Cognitive wellness. Well, it's can be kind of a fancy, right? And okay, good. All right. So, but here there's easier ways to think about it. We know that it encompasses our perception, our attention, our memory, our language, our learning, our problem solving, and our decision making. Very important part of wellness. So a simple way to think about it is it's a term that refers to our thoughts, what we think about, and why we have those thoughts in our head. So that's important to know. Emotional wellness, it's a very emotionally demanding job, police work. We all know that. And there's all kinds of different emotions that can happen throughout your, you know, throughout your job. You're going to have some critical incidents, right? You're going to have, you know, you're going to witness that suicide. You may be involved in an, you know, an officer involved shooting. You know, you may have those really high end things happening. And then of course there's times on the job where you're just patrolling and chilling. You got your radio on your favorite channel. And then you go from that all of a sudden to, okay, now I got a 1010 fight in progress, corner tavern. So you go to that and then chill. So it's demanding. And then of course, when we're talking about demanding and emotional, a lot of that has to do with kind of like the things that bothered me the most had to do with victims that were children and victims that were elderly. And so those things kind of take a toll on you. Those things that you know, where you're probably going to need to seek help. You know, we had a 3-year-old girl that's still an unsolved mystery, unsolved crime. And she was lost, she got kidnapped. And several months later, a family found her behind her house in their house in a shallow grave. And so I was the one on that call. She was 3 years old. She still had the little white nightgown on. I mean, she had decomposed to certain points too, and it just looked like the nightgown that my 3-year-old daughter would wear to bed. And so what I did was, after that call was over, I lived in the same town that I worked in. So I drove home, and my daughter was asleep in bed, but I picked her up, and I wanted to make sure she was okay, you know, and I cried, but I was happy, but I was sad. And, I'm the one that still has my child, somebody lost theirs. So, I coped with that I needed to see my daughter right then. And then a lot of you have heard about emotional roller coaster, right? And policing. And think about it. I'm sure almost everybody's familiar with Kevin Gill Martin and the biological roller coaster. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. So even if you have a shift and it's like, okay, it's not like going from call to call to call and things are crazy and things are violent. We just have to know that when we go to work, like this is just our normal, hey, this is my normal. This is how I'm just, grooving along. This is cool. Everything's fine. When I go to work, even if I'm not getting calls, even if things aren't crazy, I'm always more vigilant. I'm more attentive, and that's in my mind. And I'm staying attentive. I'm staying more vigilant. I'm, the stress hormones maybe are a little higher throughout your, your entire shift. And then we also know that it's a natural biological thing in our body that if we go up here to work, we can't just go back down to that normal level, right? We know that we're going to go below it. We're exhausted. Maybe we're frustrated. Maybe we're tired and things like that. And it's going to take a little while to get back up to that normal thing. And so this is something that I make sure the recruits understand, but I also talk to families. They understand. So they know that when their loved one comes home from work and they're not really wanting to talk, or they're a little grouchy or just need to relax, that it doesn't mean they don't love you. It's just, this is a natural biological response. And there's ways to get that back up sooner through, exercise and different types of, meditation and breathing and things like that. So that's a part of it that I think that a lot of you may be familiar with. And of course, social wellness. Our health depends on positive affiliations with others within and outside of policing. And I'll get to that a little bit more too. Okay. And then of course, spiritual wellness, maybe related to your religious beliefs and your religious practice. Not everybody's religious, but can still be spiritual. What's spiritual to somebody might not be religious, but it's different for them. So their spiritual health may depend on their ability to remain committed to their values and their integrity and things like that. So you can think of spiritual wellness doesn't always just mean, I'm a devoted religious person. I attend church. I read the Bible. I have my Bible study groups and all these kinds of things. It can mean different things for different people. So managing police stress. When you're instructing this, you want to get the recruits or your veteran officers involved as much as possible. And you want to put them in groups. You want to have them talk and discuss things with each other, and they learn from each other. And so I put them in a group, and I said, okay, we've talked about stress. We've talked about all these different things, whether it's the, organizational stress or the, job, or outside the job, or all these different kinds of things. How are you going to manage that? And they, on their own, usually come up with awesome ideas. So give them time to do that, and then they come back. And here's some of the things that they come up with. And then I share a few of my own that maybe they don't mention. So first and foremost, remember the reason you chose this career, because I have them complete something early on in the academy. Why did you choose this career? And I want to be part of the community. I want to help people that can't help themselves, right? I want to be there for people, and I want to help people, and I want to all these, and they truly believe that. And sometimes we know, okay, tell me if I'm wrong, but sometimes cops can become a little negative and cynical over time based on all the interactions that they've had. But if you can keep in mind, I chose this career for this reason, and I'm still, still tied to that. So yeah, feel good about a job where you can help people that can't help themselves. It feels so good to be able to help people. And then, it's like, okay, yeah, there's sometimes you can't help people, but it's important when you can. Spiritual wellness, okay, they all determine what that is for them. We have a diversity of different religions, and then they can also kind of learn a little bit about diversity and other people's ideas. And so, but what is that for them? And then exercise. So students determine what's that for them. What do they like to do? Different people have different things they do that's fun to exercise. So they mentioned that's what I'm going to keep doing throughout my career. And eating healthy. And we know sometimes the young people don't always eat healthy. Sometimes veteran cops don't always eat healthy. Sometimes it's pretty easy to go through the, the drive-through window at McDonald's or Wendy's or wherever and get the, get your food because, oh, I'm just so busy at work and I'm do this and I do that. And it's just easier to do that. So I have them, we talk about nutrition after the little part on nutrition. Then I have them, all right, get your computers out. Everybody Google, look up your favorite meal from a restaurant or your fast food restaurant. And then we're going to report out and we're going to see who the winner is. Well, sometimes we consider that the worst, even though they're the winner. And they start looking and they look at, okay, how many calories, how much saturated fat, how many carbs, how much protein, how much sodium. And then they're just like, wow, this hamburger is 750 calories and it's 40 grams of saturated fat and it's this and this and this, but it's really good. And it's like, so is that okay once in a while? Is that reasonable? Yes, but just think about over time, you're putting that into your body. Positive attitude, be optimistic, right? Positive attitude. And when you're teaching about positive attitude, you're going to be optimistic when you're teaching, and you can focus and display positive things, and you can maybe even give some positive stories. And they don't have to be like, okay, I was up on Hobson Drive in the apartments and I was able to perform CPR and I saved this person's life. That's a very positive thing. It really is. But sometimes it's the smaller things that are kind of cool that they're thinking, yeah, that was neat. So one of the stories I might tell is, all right, so and we had not a huge town. I mean, we had a very diverse town. We had that I worked in. It was not wealthy by any means, lower SES and factory workers and stuff. But we had a small enough department that if the animal control officer took a day off, we usually handled the animal calls. So I came to work 3 to 11, and it was a cold winter day in Illinois. And so I'm out on patrol and it's a blizzard and the snow and can't see much and it's really cold. And I get a call from Malsbury Court that somebody's dog was missing. And could I go look for it? The dog got away. So I started to head out, it was kind of on the edge of town. And then I started to kind of head out of town a little bit. And then I looked to my right, just past the ditch and in the field. I didn't know if it was like a snowball going because it was a white poodle, but it's flopping around. And so I get out, walk through the snow, pick up the dog, bring it back to my car, put it in the passenger seat, turn on the heat for it, right? I mean, we're all animal lovers, dog lovers, and unless you're not, but you should be. And so I'm probably a quarter mile out of town. I turn around and there's an elderly woman bundled up, hunched over, walking. She had walked that far in this blizzard. And I pulled up to her and I said, ma'am, is this your dog? And she looked at me and she said, thank God you found my dog. It's all I've had since my husband died, who had just recently died. That was a good feeling. That's a positive. There's a lot of things like that we just say, oh, that's our job, but it really can make an impact in your training and in, making sure that we're keeping those in our minds, right? We got a lot of the negatives that kind of stand out, but how about all these little positive things that have happened? We went back to her condo and she made brownies and talked about her husband, and I spent another half an hour or so there till I got another call. But just if you can think of positive things when you're teaching, that's great. And also we know that cops have a sense of humor. And sometimes this cop humor is nothing we want to share with the public. And because they wouldn't understand, because it sounds like you're not compassionate and empathetic. You are. It's just a way of coping, right? So, I might tell stories that are okay to tell, that I could tell that in any conference or whatever. So, things that happen when you're a rookie, right? So I go on a call, I pull up to the trailer park. It's a loud stereo call. I walk up there and I'm getting ready to tell them, hey, we had a complaint about the music. I'd appreciate it if you can just turn it down, blah, 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 doing my spiel. And then I come back out and my car's gone. And I thought, oh no, I'm new, right? I'm just now out on my own. Somebody stole my car, even though I had the keys. But I'm walking out there to my car. And then all of a sudden, as I'm walking, I start walking down one of the roads and I start hearing on the radio, warmer, warmer, colder, cold, warmer. So it was my buddies telling me, leading me to my car as a joke. And also just something to keep on in the side if you're fairly new on the department and you have cops with sense of humor. If you leave like the hot cheddar fries in the canteen on a table open, sometimes they make them hotter with pepper spray. Just saying, just a warning. So, but yeah, that kind of sense of humor. Training. Man, I can't preach this enough to veteran officers and to recruits. If you think about this, all right. So if I train and I know my job well, I know the laws well, I know the strategy and tactics well, I'm good at my verbal skills, I'm good at my control tactics, I know all of my policies and procedures, I know my geography, which is a tough one when you first start. And if I train myself at all of these things, I'm going to be more confident, and then I'm not going to be as anxious. And the one thing about training is when I see and watch videos or I'm out on patrol and I see somebody yelling and screaming and cussing at an officer, giving them all kinds of crap, and I see the officer standing there very calmly and just say, sir, I can see you're upset. I would be too. I get it. But if I can just get your driver's license from you, get your name, I can get you out of here a lot quicker, and then they're just yelling and screaming. That officer, they're probably confident in their verbal skills because they're using them, and they're confident in their physical skills because this looks like it's something that could get physical, but if it does, I'm ready, right? And in today's world, everybody's learning in the United States and around the world that the martial art of jiu-jitsu is getting huge. Some departments now are making it mandatory. You need to get to blue belt before you can do this or that, in academies, even if they have longer academies. They're providing, there's adopt a cop programs in jiu-jitsu where it's free for cops if you stay there until you reach a certain belt. And I mean, being a martial artist for so long, it's like, if you're so confident and I'm on the street and I can be confident talking to that person, then if it gets ugly, I can know how to control them. And so if I can have that extra training, because once you learn your physical skills in the academy, and then maybe you have most departments, okay, you're going to have this year, you're going to have twice 4 hours of firearms, 4 hours of control tactics. And it's just not going to work. We need to train. We need to train on our own. And, some of the things that I really push and enforce and teach at my academy are, I want you to be not necessarily a blue belt, but I want you to be a blue belt in side control, top mount control, and back control. So no matter what position they're in, I can control them and feel confident and backups on the way. And a lot of times that can lead to controlling somebody rather than it's escalating. Now we're fighting. Now we're getting the taser out. Now, next thing you know, it's a deadly force situation. So I really think that officers that are not good at those things are more likely just to go to hands-on quicker. I have no empirical research on that, but just anecdotally, officers sometimes that are even just scared seem to go hands-on quicker. They don't know what to do. So I'm telling you, training in every aspect, but that's something I really like to push, and I think it's getting to be, a national thing. All right, here's the other thing: be a regular person. Don't be a cop 24/7, right? Because you are so much more. I'm a dad, I'm a son, I'm a husband. I do things in the community. I'm involved in my other activities that aren't law enforcement related. And I have all these other things, and I'm not just defined as a police officer. It's a big part of your identity, and it's an important part of your identity, and you should be proud of that identity. But when you need to be a regular person, don't be a cop 24/7, right? I know you're going to go to the family events and they're going to, ask you questions or say, hey, I was only speeding 2 miles an hour over the speed limit, and I got stopped by one of you guys. Well, you're lying. Nobody's going to do that. Or, hey, Mike, do you have to wear shoes when you drive? You know, just all these crazy questions come up, and it's like, I don't see anything in the Illinois Vehicle Code, but as much as you can, just be a regular person, you know. And they say, well, you know, I have the things that I do. I play video games. Are they cop video games? Yeah. I go to the range to shoot. Okay. I go play, you know, now the big thing's pickleball. I go play pickleball. Who with? My cop friends. Who cop? So it's like cop games, cop shows, cop movies, cop. And yeah, you have these other things you're doing, but they're all related to cop. So get out of that and be more than that. And you can be more than that in your community. And say no to overtime sometimes. And this is not easy for officers a lot of times, especially when they're new and they have a family and you're trying to bring in more money. But the truth is, if, you know, there was an officer in my department that worked like 27 days in a row overtime. And that was definitely not healthy for that officer. And finally, toward the end of his career, he started slowing that down a little bit. But meanwhile, you know, he didn't have the family thing. He ended up getting divorced. I mean, there could be a number of reasons for that. But I mean, so, you know, a lot of department chiefs and sheriffs may not want to hear this, but if somebody asks you for overtime and you're not mandated, don't take it, because here's what happens with you financially. You're going to start having this money coming in because right now all departments are really low on officers, and so you're getting all this overtime. Eventually, you're going to be at full staff again. Well, probably never completely, but you're going to be at full staff again, and then that overtime's not there. But you've been relying on that because now you bought that new boat and that new truck because you have that overtime money coming in, or you've bought anything that's black and says tactical, because that's what cops do. They like cool stuff. So make sure you're not beating yourself up and too involved in that. Have goals within and outside of your profession, right? You want your professional goals, but have other goals. Be financially responsible. You know, I had a Sergeant Carter in my department the day I started policing when I was 21 years old back in the early 80s. And he said, you need to start a retirement fund. And I said, I'm 21 years old. And back then I was making, well, still probably okay back then, but $8.67 an hour. He said, Mike, can you afford $15 or $20 a month out of your check? Probably, it's not that much. And then my next raise, he said, are you living okay on what you got? Why don't you put more in? And then I continued to do that through that career and my career at the academy. And I learned that time makes money more than money makes money. And, you know, it's going to set you up and you're going to be able to retire more comfortably. And continue your education, whether that's, you know, through training in law enforcement, whether that's through, I like to read these books, I like college courses, I'm going to the veteran officers training, or I want to learn a new skill, something. Just continue the mind and continue your education. All right, another thing I have the recruits do, and this is something if you're teaching recruits or even teaching veteran officers, it's like, I want you to write down the 5 most important things in your life. Physically write them down, not on your computer, but on a piece of paper. And then we share, you know, and everybody will raise their hand and, you know, well, you know, God and my family and this and that. And then some people, they might have their career in there too, or, you know, and then probably a third of them, my dog or their pet, you know, but it's related to, you know, their family. It might be my integrity. It might be, but what's the most important things in your life? So then I tell them, and this becomes metaphorically because it would be kind of hard to do and weird, but I tell them, I said, now take that piece of paper, fold it up, put it in your pocket, keep it every day in your pocket, get it out in the morning, read it every single morning so you can keep priority of what is important to you. And are you starting to get away from those priorities? If your priority was to spend more time with your kids and now all of a sudden you're not, right? You're too busy with work and other things that are going on. Man, this is my priority. I need to get back to my priority. So 5 most important things, and just, you know, try to hang on to that throughout your career and remind yourself. All right, so we talked about wellness and all those components of wellness. We got that. But here's something a little bit new. I've been working with Professor Dan Bloomberg and Konstantinos Papazaglou over the last few years, and we're working on studying the link between how ethics affects wellness and how wellness affects ethics. And sometimes that's not considered within the wellness realm. All right, so the intersection of wellness and ethics, and there is And that's kind of the new thing we need to try to get across. So emotionally and psychologically healthy police officers are more likely to stay committed to their ethical principles. That makes sense. Officers who experience emotional difficulties are more likely to make unethical decisions. And think about that. But if officers are having more emotional difficulties, they're more likely to make unethical decisions. Officers that make unethical decisions are more likely to suffer emotionally, right? Which can increase unethical decisions and can lead to moral injury, because then you're realizing these decisions have had an impact on me emotionally and spiritually and suffering in other ways. So I just think that it's important to make sure that we keep that in check, because those things do go hand in hand. So we have a moral code, okay? When you establish a moral code, it's easier to stay committed to doing what you believe is right. And this is your moral compass, pointing in the right way, okay? It's pointing where I want it to point. This is my moral compass, and these are, my values and all these kinds of things, right? And so, but sometimes it's just normal in policing with the stress and the chaos and all the difficulties and in this very complicated job. So it's easy to sort of drift from that moral code and have that compass shift a little bit. But it's never too late to recalibrate that compass. So when I'm talking to veteran officers, they're obviously thinking of certain things that maybe they did that weren't exactly along with their values, their core values. So here's an exercise for your students. Write down your core values. Every student, give them a few minutes, write them down. And again, we have people share, with the class. We try to keep it as interactive as possible. Some classes it's a little more difficult to do that, but the more courses you teach, whether it's wellness or anything else, the more involvement and engaged you can get your students where they're part of the learning. That's really important in every class. So after they write down their moral code, I say, okay, ask yourself these questions. How willing are you to stand up for what you know to be morally correct, regardless of the consequences? Okay, so and then these kind of could be rhetorical, right? That one could be. What situations might you find yourself in that could make it difficult to stick to your principles? And recruits will come up with ideas, and veteran officers will come up with a lot of ideas because they've been experiencing the job. Is there anyone who ever pressures you to violate your principles? Think about that. How have you felt after violating one of your moral standards? So this is just a nice little exercise. I mean, there's so many that you can find, but it's one that I use at the academy. So moral disengagement. So let's talk a little bit about moral disengagement. So moral disengagement explains how people are capable of distancing themselves emotionally and ethically from others, right? Us and them, right? This can lead to less empathy toward people, less compassion, and dehumanize others. And there's a greater likelihood of unethical behavior, decision-making, or maybe more force than you would normally use. Because, so let me back up just a little bit and say there does need to be some moral, not really moral, but there does need to be some disengagement from some of the awful things you see. Because if you took everything you saw so serious, and because you're compassionate and an empathetic person, we could start getting this compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma and things like that. So if we can't distance ourselves a little bit, from others, it would take an even heavier toll. So moral disengagement and things like the noble cause, right? The end justifies the means. Yeah, I had to do this, but this person deserved it anyway. This is what they did. Did you see what they did to that person? The us versus them mentality. And it's not easy to try to get away from that. I mean, community policing and getting to know your community as a person and letting them get to know me as a person, and those things will definitely help. But the things we see in the news, the bad things that happen, the mistrust and distrust of police, it's not easy, but we need to work hard of getting rid of the us versus them mentality. And then there's the guardian versus warrior mentality, right? And it's so misunderstood by many because it's like, oh, I have to be a guardian. I just have to be nice to people. I need to be, I need to be in the zone. I need to be ready because at any time I might get shot at and somebody might punch me in the face. I just need to be, I'm always ready. Okay. That's not good for you either. But think about it like this. Just because you're a guardian doesn't mean that you don't have or can't use your fighting prowess. And the way I like to explain it is, I'm my family's guardian. I'm there for my wife, my mom, my kids, my grandkids. I'm their guardian. And however, if somebody did something or tried to do something harmful to them, do you think my fighting prowess would come out? And we rely on our fighting prowess based on our training. Remember that previous one, training. So if you have that guardian mentality where you're there to help those that can't help themselves, and that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be the times where you don't have to, that you're going to have to act. So people, it's not just one or the other. It's guardian mentality throughout my career. And then when bad things happen right then, I'm ready to go. I'm trained and I know how to handle that. Was that it on that one? Yeah. All right. Other risks that lead to misconduct. So we have moral compromise. You're often faced with situations that require a moral compromise. What is in the public's interest versus what is the law, right? And discretion. Discretion can lead to ethically questionable behavior. Officers routinely decide what to enforce and what to ignore, who gets a ticket and who doesn't get the ticket. And we have, professional courtesy, which is okay to a certain point. If I stop a cop and they're doing something that I would not write a ticket for, they get a break, of course. If it's something super serious and I would handle this, with someone else differently, then I still need to do the right thing. But let me give you another example of discretion. And this is a story that I tell my recruits at PTI, Police Training Institute. So I tell them about a time that I stopped a vehicle and it was going down Route 136. I just tell stories because I remember easier if I actually say the names of the place. Driving down 136 and it was nighttime and pulled into the IGA grocery store. And the car had a expired license plate. The muffler was loud. Okay. Find out later there's a headlight out. Person did not have insurance. Okay. And so a lot of violations. So I asked them, what would you write? What ticket would you write? Well, I would definitely write the insurance. I would definitely write the expired plate. I would do this. And some would say, well, I would write all of them and I would do this. And I said, remember when we talked about community policing? Remember when we talked about, I want to get to know the people in my town or my village or my precinct. If you're at a bigger location, I want them to get to know me. Well, I knew who this person was and I had interacted with her a lot. And I knew that she was a grandmother raising her grandchildren because the mother was in prison and the father wasn't around. I knew that she works hard at it. I know she, I would be, playing catch with them outside of their, apartment complex. I would get to know them. If they got into some sort of trouble, I would be mentoring them. And she really wanted them to grow up the right way. And she worked hard at it. I also know that having all those kids and trying to afford them, I knew that she worked all day at one of the factories in Rantoul. I knew she was pulling in there to work her second job as a cashier at the grocery store. I knew that whatever ticket I wrote her, she wouldn't make enough that evening to pay that. So then I say, well, what did I write? And then I tell them, I didn't write her any tickets. I had that discretion. Now, was it wrong because she had all these violations? No. And I got my shift on board and I said, hey, she needs to, first thing she's going to do, she's got a check coming in Friday. She's going to get this taken care of. Then she's going to get this taken care of. Let's give her a chance to get these things taken care of rather than making it even harder for her. So just food for thought. We do have discretion. Does the situation guide the decision or on some personal factor? Okay. Officers may have to compromise their integrity to do the job. I don't know, personal values can be pitted against their role as law enforcement officers. You may be at a protest and they're protesting something you really believe in yourself. And it's like, oh, I don't really want to, yeah, but I still have to do it. And so that might make me feel like, okay, I had to do it, but it doesn't make me feel good because I believe in their cause. Okay. And the job fosters cognitive dissonance, whereby to keep the job and not suffer internal turmoil, shifts in values occur. So again, we need to focus on what are your core values? Where is my moral compass? And we need to try to maintain that. And if it gets off a little bit, recalibrate. Never too late to recalibrate. Emotional and spiritual risks. Okay, so ethical exhaustion, right? And compassion fatigue. So, we talked a little bit about the it's exhausting. Here's my ethical beliefs and all these things I'm seeing, and I feel helpless that I can't help people. I'm compassionate toward people and I still can't do the things I need to do. Constant exposure to the suffering of others, right? Feeling maybe helpless. What's the use? No matter what I do, it keeps happening. I can't fix that problem. I'm a problem solver, but maybe I can still do the best I can to continue to try to improve situations. So, because sometimes it's like, no matter what you do, people's suffering continues. Here I am getting another call for, child sexually abused, neglected, and the system, I arrested this person and now this person's back on the street before I even wrote my report. And, those just kind of take a toll on you after a while. But if we keep in mind, hey, I'm doing my job the best I can. I have control of these things that can make a difference. I don't have control of these other things that I can't do anything about. And sometimes these outcomes aren't exactly what I wanted. That's right. It's like I want this person needs to be taken from the home. And then DCFS says, no, they're not going to be taken from their home. And then I think getting to know what other people's jobs are. So learning DCFS, getting to know them, getting to know the workers. And then you might just find out, well, we have, based on what happened here, it's not serious enough to take them. In fact, we have learned through our research that removing them from that family and getting them into somewhere else, a foster care or something like that, is more harmful for them emotionally. So, and maybe you talk to the state's attorney and say, how come, you're not charging this person, or they're getting adult diversion or something to that effect, and then they might say, well, Mike, depending on how well the reports are written, what the evidence is, we only have this many judges, this many assistant state's attorneys, and we've got this many reports. We do the best we can. So understanding other, the other systems within the system is always helpful. All right, moral injury. When a potentially morally injurious event is experienced as a moral transgression, moral injury has occurred. Okay, moral injury can occur from acts of commission or omission, right? Acts of commission, mistreating a mistreating a dehumanized person. You're dehumanizing them, you're mistreating them. Acts of omission, not helping a person due to attribution of, easy for me to say, attribution of blame. Guilt, shame when reflecting on one's actions or inactions. So if I would have done this, could that have made a difference, right? And I didn't do it. Or I did this and maybe I shouldn't have done this and things didn't go the way I wanted. And that can cause moral injury, again, leading to that, spiritual and emotional issues within your life. Moral injury can occur from witnessing the transgressions of a trusted colleague or supervisor. We have the duty to intervene, but sometimes you see an officer doing something or saying something and it's not right. And so you thought so much of them and now you're like, why are they acting that way? It's betrayal. I'm angered. It's moral injury. But these moral injuries, and I'll give you another example here. So the story I told earlier about where I took this person home and they walked over, opened the drawer, turned around, looked at me and killed themselves. Everything goes everywhere. And so I started thinking back on that. And when I did, I remember pulling up to the house with him in the car. And I can't remember exactly what he said. He lived with his mom. He was, in his 40s or 50s, lived with his mom. So they were both, older people. And I said, what did he say? Something to the effect of, my mom's not going to be happy about this. Something to the effect of, but it doesn't matter anymore. Something to the effect of, it's not going to matter anymore. So what I know today is, I'm just thinking he doesn't care what his mom thinks anymore at the time. What I'm thinking now is, was he trying to tell me it doesn't matter anymore? Was he giving me those clues back in the 80s when I didn't understand what I understand now? Might I have been able to save his life if I took those as signs of suicide? And that bothered me. It didn't bother me right away, but it started bothering me once I started realizing and learning more about what we're talking about today. And so, I talked to a real good fellow officer of mine, and we had a good conversation. And could I have made a difference anyway, or would he have done that anyway, or would he have done that at another time? And then what helped more is even more recently, I met with at a conference with a police psychologist from a really large department, and starting to talk to him about it. And he said, Mike, he said, you only know that. You don't know from the beginning of his life all the way until that day what led up to that. You cannot blame yourself. So again, talking to somebody that understands how to counsel and therapy is very important. And I've learned to deal with that. All right. Policing in which their tragic outcome. There was a tragic outcome. So again, an unintentional mistake, choosing the wrong route to a call to help. Dang, if I would have just got there, taken this other route, I might have been able to get there and save that person. A lapse in judgment, maybe gotten an accident, going to the scene. Unavoidable circumstances, heavy traffic on the way, and I can't get there, I can't help. It's an emergency call. Or an unintentional act, or an intentional act, deliberately slow response to the scene. And so when we talk about those things, that's when we're talking about officers that have larger problems, right? It's like, no, that's a heroin overdose. And those people that do that, we're just going to have to get there and save their lives. And these are the old negative, cynical, old school cops, right? Why do we keep saving them? They're just going to do it again. Your job is to save lives. And there might be help that person gets, just maybe. So, but again, we know that this is the kind of job where we can get to that, that disengagement and not, care as much about people and it's us versus them. And, why do I continue to do this? So the intersection of ethics and wellness, the clinical conditions. Police officers are susceptible to anxiety and depression. We know that. We mentioned that. Anxiety can increase unethical behavior. Moral distress, compassion fatigue, ethical exhaustion, PTSD, and so on, can result and lead to officers relaxing their commitment to ethical principles. Like, what's the point? When ethical principles are compromised, behavior occurs that can result in moral injury. And we do have this intersection. We do have this of the two. So yeah, let's try to do what we can to reduce the us versus them mentality. Get out to know your community. I tell the recruits, get out to know them. Everybody in my town called me Officer Mike, and I'd know stuff about them. They'd know stuff about me personally. I still had the respect of the uniform and the officer, but I got to know the community. I was involved in the community. I stopped at the youth center. I did all these other things, and understand the guardian spirit of policing doesn't mean you're a wimp. Okay. And we need to improve officers' emotional intelligence. I need to understand my own feelings. I need to have a good understanding of others, and I need to have that empathy, and expand wellness efforts, right? Include attention to maintaining high levels of integrity, oversight and discipline. So, departments, make sure you're, focusing on this stuff and keeping this in mind. And then hiring and training, increase your focus on ethical decision making. Okay, there's a lot of new ways to gauge that when you're hiring. And it's a tough hiring process right now. A lot of people don't want to do the cop thing. We get it. So in the academy setting, again, we are a trauma-informed academy. We emphasize community policing, not just in the community policing class, but throughout the academy. We talk about the misconceptions of the guardian versus warrior mentality. We teach non-escalation and de-escalation training because how you talk to somebody to begin with can keep it from escalating. And we do dozens and dozens of scenario-based training where they get to practice these skills. And you may not respect somebody and you may not have empathy for them, but it is a skill. And as Doc Thompson from Verbal Judo, most of you know, said, when you go to work, it's showtime. You are still going to display that as a tactic. So whether I'm doing a tactic like, maybe a takedown or a control hold, or I'm doing something physical tactic, these are verbal tactics. And I'm going to win the battle by using my verbal tactics, using my skills of non-escalation and de-escalation. And I'm also going to treat people with respect and empathy, even if I'm not feeling it today. So, and go beyond if you're teaching in a department or an academy, go beyond strategy and tactics and all these kinds of things and skills. Educate them in other things. At the Police Training Institute, I brought in LGBTQ ally training. I brought in wrongful conviction awareness and avoidance, because even good cops unintentionally can be a part of somebody getting convicted and spending 20 to 30 years in prison. And then have someone that was, that was in prison for 25 and 30 years, an exoneree, come in and speak. Find the right ones. They're not going to be anti-police, I promise you. So, add more with policing in a multiracial society, add more, maybe bring community members in that are very diverse to have conversations and learn about these other things rather than just the physical part and the things you say and don't say. So overall, this is kind of a way to, and it can be done, of course, with veteran officers too. But we like to hit it up first right at the academy. So police officer wellness, ethics, and resilience. Ethics is part of in our wellness training class. Wellness is in our ethics class, and wellness is in scenarios and bits and pieces in other classes. And have scenarios where you're giving them ethical dilemmas. Recruit or officer comes up, you have some officer has somebody in handcuffs and they're using excessive force. What are they going to do? Have an officer, treating somebody poorly and getting ready to escalate things, come in, try to learn how to tag team and say, hey man, let me talk to him. I think I can, so give them scenarios so that they get the practice of intervening and sort of that, I'm tag team and I think I can handle this better. I can see he's kind of triggered your things that make you angry. I'm a new person, let me come in. So there's so many things that we can do to improve policing and police officer wellness, ethics and resilience. And this is one of the primary sources of the things I talked about today. And there's so much more in it. This is the book that I wrote with the other two colleagues I was talking about. And within it, it talks about all of the different components of wellness and positive psychology, but it also gives you in every chapter on-duty things that you can do, off-duty things that you can do to help cope and manage your stress. And the foreword was written by Kevin Gilmartin, and I'm sure you're familiar with him. And there's my other references, and that will conclude my presentation, but feel free to get a hold of me and possibly through our interaction that we're creating with this project and with this conference. But Police Training Institute, University of Illinois, Google it, you'll find me. Want to have a conversation, you want to visit, you want to whatever, have ideas for me. I'm always open to ideas. They're like Nike says, there is no finish line. Always open to feedback. And thank you.